Hello, welcome back to the Arturia DX-7 tutorial. Another deep dive for you today, and I've chosen the drift chord pad, and this is what it sounds like. It's a pad. It's beautiful. Really, really lovely pad. With the most colossal release phase you've ever heard in the history of release phases. So, we can immediately see that we've got two outputs here, two carriers, 1 and 3. Got a slightly different algorithm configuration to have a look at. That's going to be interesting. First things first, let's throw one of those carriers away and see if we can narrow one of the sides of the sound down. Now, the left-hand carrier, the left-hand chain, is doing the melodic heavy lifting. So this is where the predominant pad sound is coming from. So we've got one carrier, one modulator. What I want to do is try to get rid of a little bit of that overhead. That's an awful lot of sound to go at. And I'm pretty much convinced before we go anywhere that there's an enormous amount of reverb and delay, and sure enough, here it is. So what I'm going to do is just take all of this stuff away. I'll just pause on the analog chorus just to show. Here's the sound with the delay and the reverb gone. Take the chorus away. Okay, it's definitely lost its chorus. If I press a single note and hold it down, you see there's still tons of stuff going on with the wave here. I want to find out what's going on with that. Well, part of the reason for the modulation is actually coming from the pitch modulation control up above. Now, I will confess, I don't know why this is the case, but there's nothing explicitly outputting to this pitch modulator. It's actually connected to LFO1, as we'll see shortly. I don't know whether or not that's an internal thing. I've never owned a DX7, so I don't know if LFO1 is intrinsically tied to this pitch modulation, but basically, I'm just going to turn it off. Then obviously we've got a modulator, so I don't want that just for now, and we should have a constant sine wave, but we don't. It's bouncing up and down. So what's going on here? That's an effect of unison detune. You see that we've got unison set to 2, so there are 2 voices for every single note that I play, and the unison detune knob is slightly turned up. This is what's causing tonal modulation. Got 2 pitches very slightly out of tune with each other, and this is what you get. If I turn detune down, then the sine wave becomes absolutely static. I'm going to turn it back up because it is an inherent and intrinsic part of the sound, so it's important that it's there. But just bear in mind that everything about carrier 1 is in motion because of the detune setting, which is at the synth level. And obviously that's going to apply to carrier 3 as well when we get to look at that. So finally we've managed to narrow it down to a single sine wave. And now we can start bringing stuff back in. So let's bring the modulator back in. So operator 2 is a sine wave. Sine on sine, we saw this during the tutorial episodes, gives us this, I'd like to call it the classic FM sound. I don't know if there's such a thing really because it's such a massive topic, but sending one sine into another, this is, you know, a pretty stock sound from that perspective. You can also see that operator 1 is out of sync, so every time I press a key you get a slightly different variant. The oscillators are fundamentally out of sync with each other. Having said that, they are set up by ratio. Now, can you see that we've got this really tiny offset? This is yet more detuning. All of this is adding colour to the sound. If I take that away and then bring it back in, there's the kind of the more noticeable side of FM showing its true colours. But at tiny, tiny levels, just get that lovely little pitch offset, that lovely little detune. It's really gorgeous with a -5 detune. on the operator as well. So that's giving us our basic pad sound. Let's have a look at the envelopes. So we've got a little bit of attack here, just giving us a bit of colour at the beginning of the sound. And operator 2 follows dutifully along, so it's basically doing its thing on top of the carrier. And now let's have a look at the modulation screen. So we've got macro 1, 2, 3. Have a quick look at the other tabs. Macro 4, so all 4 macro sliders are in use. We've got some mod wheel stuff. My mod wheel's currently turned down. And the final matrix is empty. So let's have a look at each one of these in turn. Macro 1 is setting the coarse detune of operators 2, 4, 5 and 6, all out of sync, helpfully. So operator 2 is the only one that we're currently interested in. That's the modulator of this, the current chain that we're looking at. I've set 4 of my assignable controllers up to the macro sliders you can see here, just so that I can do this while I'm holding keys down and talking to you. So firstly, let's have a look at matrix 1, see what that's doing, and it's called timbre. And don't forget, this is the modulator pitch we're changing here. So that's exactly the same as coming over to the overview. I'm doing that. The master course tuning. Don't need to worry about any of the other 3 because the other chain's not in use. Macro 2, it's doing 2 things. We've got a modulator's envelope overall setting here. So this is the rate multiplier, RM. But the envelope for operator 2 really isn't doing very much at all. It's a forward motion envelope. Once it's done, it's done. It's not in loop mode. And so all the rate multiplier is going to do is basically speed that up. See it moving faster now as I change the rate multiplier from 1 upwards. And that's basically what we're getting with macro 2. Now, there was a significant colouring of the tone there, and it's not coming from this simple envelope. It's coming from the fact that macro 2 is also assigned to the modulation level, so this is increasing the effect that the modulator's having on the carrier. That's where we're getting our sound. I can turn this off and we'll still get exactly the same effect. Okay. Macro 3 is set to the reverb. I've turned the reverb off, so I'm not going to worry about that. Reverb is reverb. We don't need to obsess about that. And then we've got the cutoff on macro 4. Again, we're only interested in operators 1 and 2. And it turns out that basically it's only operator 1 that's having anything done to it. And we've got this inverted thing again that we saw earlier, where as we increase the slider, the cutoff knob is turned clockwise and the resonance knob is turned virtually anti-clockwise, so the 2 things cross over. Let's hear it. So there's not much difference to be had until we get right down into the low territory. That's where the resonance is at its maximum and you're hearing the resonance peak. While we're in the mod screen, let's have another quick chat about this pitch modulation, because I turned it down very early on, but now is an opportunity to have a look at it. So here we are, the mod wheel is assigned to LFO1 amplitude. If I turn pitch modulation back up, and I'm going to turn my modulation wheel up, you can hear the pitch modulating. And now I've got the control of the speed from LFO1. Increase the amount. Like I say, it doesn't say anywhere in the documentation why the LFO1 is intrinsically tied to pitch modulation, but it is not a source anywhere inside the mod matrix, so I can only presume it's coming internally, and I haven't been able to find an answer to why. And just to complete our due diligence, let's bring the delay back in. and the reverb, which we've already seen is controlled from slider 3. That's basically going to chug away for another few seconds. So that's all carrier 1, a fairly stock pad, but very, very nice, and all of the settings are very lovely. I do like that detune stuff in particular. Throw all of that away, get back to our basic sound, and this time throw carrier 1 away. Let's see what we've got going on here. Well, whatever it is, it's too quiet to hear, so let's turn carrier 3 up. You see I've got a chord pressed down here. That sounds pretty atonal to me. I'm going to play some notes on a scale. Okay, so yeah, it's quite an atonal effect, sound effect in the background, thickening the sound up, but it's doing lots and lots of really interesting stuff. Let's have a look at what it's doing. So we've got 2 different streams feeding into carrier 3. We've got modulator 4 all on its own, and then 5 and 6. Let's take 5 and 6 away. So now we're just worried about this little pair. Okay. Operator 4 is a square wave. A rounded square. So we just had basically the corners rounded off. Now the envelope looks quite interesting on this. So I'm going to go to my envelopes tab and get operator 4 up. Operator 3 is pretty stock, following the same amplitude curve as operator 1. So we know that those 2 things are operating simultaneously. But operator 4 is much more interesting, so I want to catch what this is doing. And I'm going to use my data sliders to help me find out what's going on. I know that data slider number 2 is mapped to all the envelope speeds, the rate multiplier. Now I'm turning up the timbre, which is increasing the tuning of all the modulators. 2, 4, 5 and 6 are all the modulators. That's what macro 1's doing. So it's not doing anything to the fundamental pitches of the tones, it's changing the speed of the modulators underneath. Let's get that sound going again. And then bring the envelope speed down. Let's have a look at that again. And finally we've got cutoff. Cutoff's not having any effect on this sound. Let's find out why. Because operator 4 is set to such a tiny amount. If I crank that up and then turn slider 4, it's nice, but it's not what this preset's doing, so we'll pull that back down again. So that's one of the things feeding into our carrier. Let's throw that away and just bring operator 5 back on its own. Let's see what that's doing. Another interesting envelope, and we're in loop. I should have mentioned that obviously the other one was in loop as well, operator 4. So this is the loop zone, and if we turn slider 2 up, you hear that quite easily. It's a nice sound, that, isn't it? Having more of an effect on the cutoff this time, so presumably operator 5 has a bigger value set. There we go. But of course that's only part of the story. Let's have a quick look over at the operator, because we've got some weird stuff going on with the tuning. So as we're changing the timbre slider, which is increasing the pitch of operator 5. Here they are, all the pitches are being affected. In fact, operator 5 has the biggest modulation from inside the in the matrix, and because that's set to an offset, get this lovely colouring. So I'm just playing with the cutoff and the timbre here. You know, this is a dynamic thing. Sometimes you've got to go hunting for the sound. There it is, that's lovely. Now let's bring operator 6 in. What's this doing? We've got a kind of hand-built sine-ish wave. Get the envelope screen up. And that's just absolutely messing with the sound royally. So here we've got modulator 6 going into modulator 5. So modulator 5 is itself being modulated, so by the time it's sending its control voltage signal, I like to think of it in terms of control voltages, by the time it sends its instructions to the carrier, it's been absolutely mangled beyond all recognition by this thing here. And so we've lost all our tone. Even at the slowest settings with the timbre control all the way down, I'm trying to slow the oscillators down as much as possible, and we're not getting a particularly harmonious tone. Let's use the term harmonious. I do think it's lovely, but it's not melodic. It's the cut-off at maximum. As things calm down a little bit. I just realised then that I hadn't actually stripped everything away and just heard the carrier all on its own. And this is that kind of almost overdriven sound. It sounds like feedback. We've got this complex sine wave shape. And when I bring the detune back in and the pitch modulation, we end up with a pretty complex sound to start with, and then we can bring the carriers back in. Excellent. And then bring carrier 1 back in. Off central. That reverb is massive. What a sound. This is what FM synthesis is all about. With such a tiny number of oscillators at our disposal, we're able to create such an incredibly complex sound. Utterly fantastic. And that's it for this deep dive. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. Check out my Patreon details below if you want to support me. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks a lot.